Bible in a year, making it easier to understand.
And that's the moment the entire nation they just collectively swiped left on God. I mean, imagine standing at the finish line of a marathon you've been running for 2 years, and you just sit down and start crying because the medal looks too heavy. That is the level of system failure we're looking at today.
Whoa, John. Good morning to you too. You are already at a level 10 and I haven't even finished my first cup of coffee.
Steph, I've been up since 4 a.m. reading Numbers 14, and I am buzzing. This is the high-stakes chapter. This is the endgame of the Exodus generation. We are talking about a full-blown national collapse.
Well, welcome to the deeper dive, everyone. We're so glad you're back with us for day 62. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm John. And today, we are at the border. We're at Kadesh Barnea. The promised land is right there. They can practically smell the grapes, and everything falls apart.
It really is tragic. I mean, we just finished the research on the 12 spies, and now we're seeing the fallout. And for our modern seekers out there, those of you who are like me and sometimes find the Old Testament language a bit, well, gate-kept, we're going to break this down. No stained glass language allowed today, right, John?
0. If we can't explain it in a text message, we aren't doing our job. Here's the plain English version of the context. Israel just got the report that there are giants in the land, and instead of trusting God, the same God who literally just split a sea for them, they have a massive countrywide panic attack.
And it's not just a little grumbling this time, is it? The text says the whole congregation raised a loud cry and wept all night. John, imagine if that happened today. Imagine a whole city just outside, crying in the streets because they're afraid of the future.
It's total social contagion. It's like a viral thread of pure fear that goes 21 million views deep in 6 hours. They start saying things like, "Would that we had died in Egypt," which, let's be real, is like saying, "I wish I was back in my toxic ex's basement because at least I knew where the light switch was." It's a modern mirror for how we romanticize our past Egypts, our old habits or addictions, just because the new thing God is doing feels intimidating.
That's so true. The fear makes them want to appoint a leader and go back. They're literally trying to fire Moses. But I want to dig into the context here because this wasn't their first time being difficult. John, you were telling me about the 10 times rule?
Yes, this is the hidden gem of the chapter. God says in Numbers 14:22 that they've put him to the test these 10 times. This wasn't a one-off bad day. This was a pattern of high-handed sin, which is just a fancy way of saying they were shaking their fist at God.
Let's do the DD on that, the dumb down. What exactly does testing God 10 times look like? Was God actually counting?
Oh, he was keeping receipts, Steph. If you look back through the context of the journey from Sinai, you see the list. 1. The Red Sea fear. 2. The bitter water at Marah. 3. The hunger in the desert of Sin. 4. The manna hoarding. 5. The Sabbath-breaking manna hunt. 6. The thirst at Rephidim. It just keeps going until the golden calf.
Wait, so Kadesh Barnea, this spy thing, was the 10th strike?
Exactly. It's the final straw. It shows that Israel had a persistent desire to return to bondage. In their minds, they were still slaves. They had what we call the grasshopper mentality.
Grasshoppers in our own sight. That's such a vivid image. They looked at the Anakim, these giants, and felt tiny. But Caleb had a different spirit.
Ruach Akeret. That's the Hebrew there. And it doesn't just mean he was braver. It means he had a totally different internal operating system. While the 10 spies were looking at the giants through a fear lens, Caleb was looking at the giants through a God lens. He actually calls the giants bread for them.
They are our bread. That is such a John analogy. Like, I'm going to eat these problems for breakfast.
Totally. But look at the context of Moses' reaction. This is where it gets crazy. God is ready to, well, basically, hit the factory reset button on the whole nation. He tells Moses, "I'll strike them with a plague and make a bigger, better nation out of you."
And most people would take that deal. Hey, Moses, you want to be the new Abraham? You want your own brand? But Moses does something incredible. He starts arguing for God's reputation.
It's divine brand management, Steph. Moses is like, "God, think about the PR. If you wipe them out here, the Egyptians are going to say you weren't strong enough to finish the job. They'll think you're a God who can rescue but can't sustain."
He's basically saying, Lord, don't let the nations subtweet you.
Exactly. He quotes God's own About Me section back to him. He says, "The Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love." He reminds God of who he revealed himself to be at Sinai. It's the ultimate intercession, pleading for mercy not because the people are good, but because God is good.
It works, but there are still consequences. The 40-year wandering. 1 year for every day the spies were in the land. John, that's a heavy sentence. An entire generation is told, you're going to hike in circles until you're gone.
It's a death by walking. But here's the kicker, and this is part of the historical context. Even after God says no, the people try to repent by force. They realize they messed up, so they try to go up and fight the Amalekites without God's permission.
And how did that go?
Brutal. They got crushed at a place called Hormah, because you can't claim God's promises if you aren't walking in God's presence. It was presumption, which is just arrogance with a religious coat on.
Wow. So we've got a nation in collapse, a leader pleading for God's brand, and a 40-year detour through the sand. That is quite the segment one.
And we haven't even gotten to the man picking up sticks or the royal blue snail dye yet.
Well, let's take a breath. We'll be right back to talk about the modern mirror and why picking up sticks was actually a raised fist to heaven.
Stick around.
And we are back. If you're just joining us, we've been wading through the heavy lifting of Numbers 14, the moment Israel essentially voted to fire God and head back to Egypt. It was a tough morning.
Tough is an understatement, Steph. It was a total organizational meltdown. But here's where the story takes one of those turns that honestly used to confuse me. We go from this high-drama national judgment straight into instructions about grain and oil.
Right. It's such a gear shift. You're reading about this generation being told they'll wander for 40 years until they pass away in the desert. And then suddenly, chapter 15 starts with, when you come into the land.
That right there is the modern mirror for today. Think about it. God just gave them the worst performance review in human history. He told them they failed the mission. But the very next thing he says is, when you get to the land I'm giving you. It's like a coach who just benched the whole starting lineup for being lazy, but then immediately starts drawing up plays for the next season on the whiteboard.
Oh, I love that. So it's a sign of hope? Even in the middle of the wandering sentence, God is saying, the plan isn't canceled. You're just taking a detour.
Exactly. It's the God of second chances logic. He's essentially saying, you guys messed up, but your kids, they're going in. So let's talk about how to live once you're there. And he starts talking about sweet aromas, grain, oil, and wine.
Wait, John, let's do a dumb down on that. Why grain and oil? We're in the desert. They're eating manna.
Great catch. In the wilderness, they didn't have farms. They didn't have vineyards. You can't grow grapes while you're hiking. So when God gives them laws for grain and wine, he's giving them a future. He's promising them a settled life where they have soil and roots. It's like God handing them a set of keys to a house while they're still living in a tent and saying, here's how to maintain the lawn once you move in.
Maintenance for the promised land. I like it. But then we hit that part that always feels a bit prickly. The distinction between the oops sins and the raised fist sins.
The deeper dive into Hebrew. This is crucial. Verse 22 talks about shagaga. That's our oops. It means an unintentional sin. It's an error made through negligence or just being human.
Like when I accidentally reply all to an email I shouldn't have?
Exactly. Or more like you accidentally break a rule because you didn't see the sign. For those, God has a system for restoration, sacrifices, and grace. But then we get to verse 30, Be'ad Rama.
With a high hand.
It literally means with a hand raised up. Imagine someone making eye contact with a police officer, then flooring it through a red light while shaking their fist. That is Be'ad Rama. It's not a mistake. It's a middle finger to the Almighty. It's saying, I know what you said, and I'm doing the opposite because I'm the boss of me.
And that's where we get the story of the man gathering sticks on the Sabbath. Every time I read that, John, my heart kind of sinks. He was just picking up wood to make a fire? It feels so harsh to say he had to be stoned for that.
I know. It sounds like a total overreaction to our 21st century years. But remember the context. We just came off a rebellion where the whole nation tried to quit God. This guy wasn't just cold and needed a fire. Under the modern mirror, this was a test case.
A test case? Like he was trying to see what he could get away with?
Precisely. The Sabbath was the sign of the covenant. It was like the wedding ring of the nation. Picking up sticks on the Sabbath wasn't just a chore. It was a public declaration that he didn't care about the treaty. He was shaking his fist at the very foundation of their community. If Moses lets that slide, the whole society crumbles because the rules don't mean anything anymore.
So it was about the intent of the heart, not just the action of the hands. He was putting himself above the collective holiness of the group.
Exactly. It's like that person in the group chat who keeps posting toxic stuff just to see if the admin will actually kick them out. He was daring God to follow through.
Well, I'm glad you're not the admin of our group chats then, John. You'd be stoning people for replying all every day.
Hey, I'm all about the grace for the oops moments. But we also see something beautiful in chapter 15. The jur.
The stranger. The sojourner. I love how the Bible keeps bringing this up.
It's the equality rule. God says there is one law for the native born and one law for the immigrant living among them. This is huge for our modern seekers. God's community wasn't an exclusive country club based on your DNA. If you wanted to follow the God of Israel, you were in. You had the same rights and the same responsibilities. It's an early picture of what we see later in the New Testament, that God is drawing everyone in.
That is so powerful. It makes the Bible feel so much more current. Like God was already building a global family back in the desert.
It really was. And he gave them a memory device to keep them from failing again. The tzitzit, the tassels.
Oh, here we go. John and his tech gadgets analogies. Is a tassel basically an ancient Apple Watch notification?
It kind of is. God tells them to put tassels on the corners of their clothes with a blue thread. Tekel it. Every time they look down, they'd see that blue thread and remember, oh, right, I'm part of something bigger. I shouldn't follow my own heart and eyes into trouble. It was a visual pop-up notification for holiness.
I actually love that. Because we all get distracted, don't we? We follow our eyes into things that aren't good for us every day. Having a blue thread as a reminder, that's something I think we could all use.
Well, don't go out and buy a blue snail just yet, because the story of that dye is absolutely wild.
A blue snail? Okay, you have to tell me more about that after we take our next break.
Oh, I will. It involves 12,000 snails and a $10,000 outfit.
All right, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to talk about the royal blue thread and how a woman in the New Testament used this very law to find her healing.
We'll be right back.
And we are back from our final break of the day. I am still reeling from that transition in chapter 15. We went from a generation being sentenced to 40 years of wandering to God, immediately talking about the blue thread they need to wear. It's like he's giving them a uniform for the detour.
Exactly. It's the covenant uniform. And Steph, this is where the archaeology gets absolutely wild. We are looking at Numbers 15, 37, 41, the command for the tzitzit, the tassels. God tells them to put a blue thread, or tekelet, on the corners of their garments. But here's the deeper dive gem. Blue dye in the ancient world wasn't like buying a pack of RIT dye at the grocery store.
Right, because they didn't have synthetic colors. So where did they get it? Was it a plant?
Nope, it was a snail. Specifically, the Murex trunculus sea snail. And get this for some Bible trivia. It took approximately 12,000 of these little guys to produce just 1.4 grams of dye. That is enough to color maybe the trim of one single garment.
12,000 snails? John, that sounds like a full-time job just to get a blue string.
It was. Which meant this color was the ancient version of a verified blue checkmark. It was royal blue for a reason. Only kings and high priests could afford it. But God tells the common Israelite, the shepherd, the bricklayer, the mom kneading dough, to wear a thread of it.
That is so beautiful. It's like he was telling them, even though you're wandering in the desert, you are still a kingdom of priests. You are royalty to me.
Boom! That's the modern mirror. We often feel like grasshoppers, insignificant, wandering, failing. But God puts his brand on us to remind us who we belong to. And there's this crazy scientific coincidence I found in the research. The chemical molecules of this specific snail dye, when measured, peak at an absorbance of exactly 613 nanometers.
Wait, 613? Like the 613 commandments in the Torah?
I know, right? It's like God left a digital watermark in the chemistry. But the real purpose was the mnemonic device. God says, look at it and remember. Because when you're out in the world and your eyes start wandering toward things they shouldn't, like that Egypt mentality we talked about earlier, you look down at that blue thread and it snaps you back to reality.
It's a physical notification for the heart. But John, you mentioned a New Testament bridge. How does this blue snail dye connect to Jesus?
This is the part that gives me chills every time. In the Gospels, there's that famous story of the woman with the issue of blood. She says, if I can only touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed.
I remember that. I always pictured her just grabbing the bottom of his robe.
But the Greek word there for hem is kraspedon, which is the exact word used for these tzitzit, the tassels. She wasn't just grabbing random fabric, she was reaching for the blue thread. She knew the prophecy in Malachi that said the Messiah would rise with healing in his wings.
Wings? I thought we were talking about tassels.
The Hebrew word for corners of the garment is kanaphim, which also means wings. So when she touched the tassels on the corners of Jesus' robe, she was saying, I believe you are the fulfillment of the law. I'm touching the wings where the healing is.
Wow. So the very thing God gave the Israelites in Numbers 15 to help them remember the law is the very thing she touched to find mercy from the law.
Exactly. Jesus wore the tassels perfectly because he kept the law perfectly. He was the true blue. And for our modern seekers listening today, that is the bottom line. The law was meant to point us to the one who could actually heal us.
What a way to end Day 62. We went from the high hand of rebellion to the healing hand of Christ.
That's the whole Bible in a nutshell, Steph. We wander, he intercedes, and then he gives us a reminder of who we are so we don't get lost again.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deeper dive. If you're following along in your reading plan, make sure to really sit with Numbers 15 tonight. Look for those blue threads in your own life, those reminders that God hasn't given up on you, even in the wandering seasons.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're making the Bible easier to understand, one day at a time. I'm John.
And I'm Stephanie. We'll see you back here for Day 63.
Seriously though, 12,000 snails. I'm never complaining about the price of a t-shirt ever again.
Bye, everyone.